Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101 with my guest, Ray Marchica. Thank you very much for being a part of this.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. When I got your email, I said, what a great idea. And thank you for asking me.
Well, glad you're here. I see you have gold and platinum records back there. You must have played on plenty of them, I'm sure, in the past.
No,
No,
actually,
really.
no. I have two of them.
That's
And
two more than a lot of people.
yeah. So one is for James Brown Living in America, which was in the Rocky IV movie.
Yes.
And the other one is a song called Waiting to See You, which was in a movie called Ruthless People. Both songs were written by the late, great Dan Hartman.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He, amazing. He died a young man. I'm not sure. He died probably in the early 90s.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Did you know him growing up, or how did you connect with him?
I connected with him. I was actually dating a female percussionist named Linda Curtis, and Dan Hartman had a hit record on the radio at that time called I Can Dream About You.
I remember that one.
You remember that as a big 80s hit,
Yes.
late 80s. Great song. So he had a mini tour. My girlfriend at the time was playing percussion, and he had auditions for drummers. And I auditioned. I really prepared because I knew he liked big drum sounds. So I had Simmons drums at the time, put triggers on my drums for the audition, and he loved it. I practiced and I studied what he wanted. So anyway, I got the gig. He liked the way I played. And then it was only a mini tour. It was like 6 weeks. Yeah, it was supposed to be longer, but the rest of it got canceled. And then about, I don't know, a month later, he said, I wrote this song for a movie, and it's all drum machines and pre-programmed electronic percussion. It was called Living in America, but the producers of the movie wanted it to sound more live. So I was added on. I never met James Brown, unfortunately. It was done in Dan Hartman's studio. And when I played the vocal tracks with Dan doing like a reference vocal track, and all I had to do was like play a strong backbeat, some cymbal crashes, some simple fills on top of his layered percussion. So that was the story with that one. And then he used me, the same thing with the same deal for this other song called Waiting to See You, which was not as big a hit. So I worked with Dan Hartman. He was an amazing musician, producer. So that's the story with that. I said, what the heck? I'll put him up, you know. So
I know you've done a whole bunch of stuff in the past. I remember listening to that song when I was in college. There's a lot of stuff that I'm sure that you played on that I used to listen to when I was younger. But before we go into that part of your career, you were born and raised in Brooklyn?
yes,
What part?
Bensonhurst or Bath Beach. So it's between Bay Ridge and Coney Island
Okay.
on the south end of, it's about a mile and a half from the Verrazano Narrows Bridge near the water on the Belt Parkway.
Do you remember what your first musical memory was?
Yeah, my uncle was a very natural musician. However, he had a vision impairment and he couldn't read music, but he was a natural. He used to play piano with like 4 fingers. He could sing, but he played drums as well. And fortunately, my house was a 3-family house in Brooklyn with a basement. And he had a little piano, not a regular upright piano, and a very old drum set. And those were my first musical memories of him just going down there playing simple beats and grooves and singing and playing the piano. And then he taught me in the very beginning. And then there was a neighborhood music school. They had a very good drum teacher, and his name was Pete Costa, and he taught me how to read. And fortunately, he was into the rudiments and really good drum books, which are still around today. The Buddy Rich drum book, the Charlie Wilcoxon book, some stick control book. So fortunately, I had two good early influences.
When did you get your first drum set?
Well, it was my uncle's drum set. So I was 10 years old, and it was an old drum set with the Slingerland Radio King bass drum, a Ludwig snare drum, and he had a Kent or Stewart tom-tom, which were not a well-known. Anyway, it's just this 3-piece kit. On that was my first kit.
Did you play in a lot of groups in elementary school, like ensembles, or was that?
I started at about 10 years old, and then when I went to middle school, I played in the band, and my middle school teacher, Alex Hershenson, I'm still in touch with him. He took a liking to me because I was studying privately, and I knew how to play the drums and read music. So he took advantage of that and actually gave me a big solo to perform in middle school. So it was great. It was great. Sam Ulano, you remember Sam Ulano?
Yes, I took a couple of lessons with him. He was amazing.
Yeah, he came to our middle school. He gave a concert. Sam Ulano used to play the drums to fairy tales. Like, you can find them on YouTube. Like, he tells Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and he was very theatrical. And he'd back himself up with he'd play Goldilocks, and he know the story. And he invited me up on stage to be his guest artist that day. I was fortunate to have Mr. Hershenson, who got Sam Milano to come to the middle school. So my uncle, Pete Coster, I had these angels around me, I guess.
Speaking of going to high school, did you see yourself wanting to become a professional musician?
Yep.
From the beginning, you were like, that's what I want to do?
Yep.
Was there any specific person that you looked up to and said, that's what I want to do? Did you have any drumming influences back then? Or was it more of your teachers that were like, supportive and say, you can do this too?
So my uncle had a great time playing music, and he played in wedding band. And I used to watch him. I went to a couple of his gigs, and I actually sat in with them. And it was thrilling for me as a 12-year-old to, put on a suit and actually play and people dance. So my uncle was the first influence. And then Buddy Rich was the guy. Buddy Rich, when I saw him on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and then I would also see Ed Shaughnessy on The Tonight Show. Those guys, I looked up to them. And first, I was gravitated to the band, like Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I really liked Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. The bands that had horns in them, something about the horns and the big band sound really attracted me, more so than what was going on in pop music. I liked Ginger Baker and Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and I liked the rock drummers back then who had a jazz influence.
It's one thing that was prevalent back then. Ginger Baker, John Bonham, those guys idolized people like Elvin Jones.
Exactly.
Just that, I didn't really grasp that until later in my career when I knew how to look back at people's influences and how that impacted their current playing. But you were more into the big band thing. That's interesting. Were you in big bands in high school? Were there any kind of ensembles like that?
Yeah, we had a stage band in high school. And besides the concert band where you play snare drum and bass drum and timpani, there was something called a stage band, and I was in the stage band.
That's what they called it when I was
the stage band.
Yes.
But I also had two buddies of mine who from my neighborhood, and they were into, but we were like Buddy Rich snobs. We were like, no, if you couldn't play like Buddy Rich, that would be, nah. We were naive and stupid and narrow-minded, actually. But Buddy touched me. Buddy Rich really touched me. And Bobby Rosengarten used to be the band leader on the Dick Cavett show. So I used to watch the late night shows in high school. And if I knew Buddy Rich was going to be on, I definitely watched him.
Did you ever get a chance to meet him?
I did.
Really?
Yeah. My dad took me to see him He used to play in Central Park at the Woolman skating rink. You know, the skating rink. They used to have concerts there every summer. And Buddy Rich, I saw him play there maybe 3 or 4 times. I saw him play at the Blue Note. I saw him play at the Bottom Line.
So when you met him, was it did you have a long conversation, or was it just really brief?
The first time I met him, he was really nice to me. I got backstage and he gave me his autograph. I still have it.
Did you meet him as an adult before he passed away?
I actually did. I mean, I was playing La Cage au Folles in 1983, 84, 85. It was a big hit back when that was a big hit, La Cage, when it first came. And we were playing the exit music. And it was like, I mean, the exit music. People were leaving the theater. And I'm playing like this. And I look up, and Buddy Rich, he looked in the pit, and he went like this to me.
Oh, man, that's cool.
And then the next night, he was playing at the Bottom Line. That's why he was in New York. And then I met him. I went backstage, and he was nice. I said, Buddy, I was the drummer last night. He said, hey, good. Very cool, very cool. And I think I knew some of the band members at that time. At that time, I was in my 20s, and some of the sax players, I knew some of them. So, yeah, I got to meet him. It was wonderful.
When you finished high school, you wanted to go study music, or did you want to just go play professionally?
I wanted to study music.
And what did you do?
I went to Brooklyn College and studied classical percussion. I was also interested in classical percussion, timpani, xylophone, everything, how to play in an orchestra. And my teacher was Morris Arnold Lang. They used to call him Arnie Lang. So Arnie Lang, unfortunately, passed away this past July 5th. 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
He was 90 years old, 90 years young. He's really, all of his friends and former students thought he would really live for a really long time. Unfortunately, he had a long life, but it was kind of shocking that he died on July 5th. Anyway, I studied percussion with him, and he was a wonderful teacher. He taught me he broke the mystery of like, oh my God, did you ever play in percussion ensembles?
Well, in high school, not really a percussion ensemble, but I played in the concert band. That's the extent of ensemble playing like that.
Right. So in Brooklyn College, we had a percussion ensemble, and we played a lot of contemporary music, like written specifically for percussion ensemble. And Morris Lang really broke something looked really hard, like 5s and 7s and changing meters. And sometimes the notation would be, it would just be like a squiggly lines or arrows pointing up, or hit a gong and put it in water. If you hit a gong and put it in water, it makes an interesting sound.
Oh, wow. I've never.
Contemporary stuff. So, but he demystified it. He made it seem like you can do this. Even though you're a drum set player, you can do this. And it was wonderful.
Why did you choose Brooklyn College and not another place like Juilliard or Berkeley?
Well, my high school teachers said that Brooklyn College had a very good program at the time, which they did. And it was affordable for my parents because it's a city university, and it was kind of close to my school. It was convenient, affordable, and really good. So those were the 3 reasons.
When you graduated, did you want to stay in New York? Did you want to explore LA or go on tour? What was the next path right after college?
So I wanted to stay in New York. There's a lot happening in New York, and I knew it. I was an hour subway ride away. The D train took me to Midtown Manhattan. I graduated from college in
What year was that?
76.
Oh, man, you were right in the middle of things.
I'm coming through the tail end of the real hit. Steve Gadd was at his peak so I got out of college, and I was like, what do I do now? I started practicing more drum set and less xylophone and timpani. And Steve Gadd was playing around a lot at a club called McKell's, and Stuff used to play there a lot with Steve Gadd and Chris Parker.
Mm.
These the two drummers. It was amazing. So after I graduated college, I said, I want to do more drum set. And at that point, Morris Lang knew the contractor for a chorus line. The Broadway show, it was still running. The original one was still running. And long story short, they needed a drummer to go on the road. I auditioned. I went on the road. They liked me. It wasn't a complicated audition. I had to, for the contract, I just had to, literally, I went into his house. He was the drummer. His name was Herbie Harris. And I played maybe 5 minutes to him. He said, play me a little funk beat. Now, what if I told you to play it soft? What if I told you? So I did that for him. And then he said, okay, learn the show. So I learned the show. And Hank Jaramillo was the drummer, who's the wonderful, wonderful studio drummer at the time. And he moved out west. So I learned the show from Hank Jaramillo. I played it. And the conductor, Don Pippin, liked me. And he said, okay, he's good. He can go on the road.
So back in 1976, in order to prepare for a show, it's a lot different than it is now. You didn't have a conductor cam video and all that stuff. You had to just go in and record the person playing. Did you go into the pit of Broadway to watch the person playing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in my case, I learned the percussion book because I'm still playing percussion. Because Ben Herman, like you said, there was a lot happening then. So Broadway still had the older guys. The younger guys wanted to do studio work in clubs. And so I was one of the first younger guys to get into Broadway.
Did people look down on you? Did they look at you like, what are you doing? Look at all this other stuff over here.
Not
Did they look
really.
at it? Did they look at it as corny or?
Because chorus line at that time was like Hamilton at the time.
Wow.
You know, it was like, whoa. Or Ain't Too Proud to Beg. It was a good, hot show to do. You know, it wasn't like My Fair Lady or something.
Right.
You know, so, no, they didn't look down on it. And so the way I learned it, I had a cassette recorder. I got the music, a copy of the music. I recorded it on cassette and did my homework. But it wasn't as intense as it is now in terms of playing exactly what the person, what the intensity of
Subby wasn't like it is now.
Yeah, if for chorus line anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, like if there was a fill, Hank Jaramillo would play the fill differently every night. I watched him play it at least 4 times. You know, I didn't just go in and think, oh, I could do this. No, he would play it a little differently every night. Sometimes he'd play the groove on the hi-hat. Some nights he'd play it on the ride cymbal. Sometimes he'd play 8. Some nights he was very creative, and they allowed his creativity. And I thought, okay. And I kind of lived in his envelope of where to go, and I got accepted. So there was some leeway. But you still had to watch the conductor. You still had to play the right dynamic. You still had to know the music.
So you went on tour with a chorus line. How long were you out?
I only did it for about 8 months because I wanted to get back to town. I didn't want to be on the road for that long. And then when I came back, I started subbing on chorus line. I started sub Hank. And there was another drummer who played the show too, Earl Williams, who was a really good jazz drummer. So I subbed for them. And then Don Pippin, the conductor, got the gig at Radio City, and they wanted younger guys in the orchestra. So now it's 1979. He asked if I wanted to be his drummer at Radio City, and was like, whoa, 25 years old, and I got that gig. I didn't even have to audition for it. He just gave me the gig.
The Radio City Christmas Spectacular?
That was, yeah, they also had a summer show at that time. They had a summer show. They had a fall show, like a little show. They did Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Then they had the Christmas Spectacular. They had a spring show. So they had seasonal shows: summer, fall, winter, and spring.
Wow.
2 years, and then Don Pippin. I did it for 2 years, and then Don Pippin got another Broadway show with Lauren Bacall. It was called Woman of the Year, and he asked me to be the drummer on it. And I was very reluctant to leave the chair at Radio City to do a Broadway show. But I went anyway, and he said, I'm going to take you my next show and my next show, and he did. I was his drummer.
Why were you reluctant to leave Radio City?
Because I liked it, and it seemed like a steady gig. And the new show I was doing, I was like, what if it doesn't run? What if it's only runs 6, it was... And Don reassured me. He said, Ray, I will take you if I have other Broadway shows. He said, and did you ever hear of Don Pippin? He's in his 90s now. Fantastic. You can look him up. Pippin, Don Pippin. He and I had a really good relationship. Really, he trusted me. He liked where I put the beat, and I could read what he wanted.
Were you doing the session work, jingles, TV shows, playing with big artists back then, in addition to the Radio City thing and eventually doing the Broadway show? Were you doing all that stuff at the same time, or was it more focused on Radio City and then your Broadway show?
I started to do a little of the jingle thing as a substitute. So the jingle scene back then was thriving. That was before computers and before guys could do everything. One guy can write a jingle on his laptop now. But back then you needed musicians. So a lot of times the older guys, I was in my 20s back then, the guys in their 30s and 40s needed emergency lessons. Hey, I got this gig I was on, it's going overtime, and now I'm going to be late for my other one. Could you be available for my other one? So I was a sub. I was like the young guy who would run in and sub to them. And then every once in a while I get my own jingle also.
So tell me about this whole radio registry thing. I remember hearing about it, but I got here in 1993 and I heard stories about it. So radio registry was a service that connected musicians to recording studios, correct?
So again, I'm coming in at so the peak maybe was the early 70s, and now it's the late 70s, and it's starting to slow down a little because MIDI drum machines. So radio registry, the number was 212-582-8800. 212-JU2-8800. Everybody knew that number.
So you call, okay, tell me how it worked. So you remember the number. That's crazy.
That's good. Yeah. JU2-8800. So guys would tell me, he said, Ray, you got to join registry. So basically there were no cell phones or beepers, pagers back then. So I'm trying to think how it really worked. So you always have to check your home phone machine. Let's say I was, I don't know, walking my dog or something, or out just shopping or something. And then I got home, it'd be Ray on my phone machine, Ray, call registry. We have something for you for tomorrow. So someone told either an orchestrator, another drummer, a composer would call registry, and they'd be like an answering service to you. Rather than do you remember a drummer named Jimmy Young?
I've heard the name.
Very good. So he was in the heyday, Jimmy Young. He was one of the guys I subbed for. He's still around doing it. Anyway, he would call registry and say, I'm going to have a conflict tomorrow. Can you call Ray, see if he's available? So Jimmy wouldn't call me, but he would tell registry to call me. So registry was like like your own personal secretary kind of thing. But you had to call check in because there was no cell phone, so you always had to call your own phone machine with with quarter. You had to put quarters in.
So they would the radio registry would leave a message saying, "Greg, can you do a recording session between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. tomorrow?" That you'd have to call and get that from your answer machine. Then you'd call radio registry and say, "Yes, I can do it." Then they'd book.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Ah,
Is that clear? Or like,
yeah.
no, why wouldn't the guy just leave it? Well, because the drummer or the contractor or the orchestrator, he's too busy to call 20 people. So he'd call registry and sometimes I think registry would act as a contractor and they would say, well, I know Bob Milliken is a great trumpet player. I'm just going to call Bob Milliken, even though this orchestrator said he needed 3 trumpet players. So sometimes radio registry, they would act as a contractor.
What if you knew somebody at radio registry and be like, "Look, man, here's $500. Just call me first."
I was too young and naive to really know if what kind of that was
What kind of
very.
games people played?
I didn't play any of those games. I don't know how they worked, to be honest with you. I don't know if they worked, but I knew you had to be a fucking good musician
What if,
for cursing.
what if radio registry called Clayton Craddock to play? Yeah, I want you to play on the new Fania All Stars record. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. Fania, what they call it? Fania All Stars. Look, I can't play that stuff. But what if I'm the wrong person for the gig? I show up and I'm like, I can't play, Latin jazz. You should have called someone else.
Who told them to call you though?
Oh, so I guess whoever is recommending, they know better.
Yeah, like
Interesting.
maybe who's the orchestrator of Ain't Too Proud?
Harold Wheeler.
So maybe Harold would say, "Hey, he sounds great on this Motown stuff." So even though I got Harold would be the person to tell registry.
I gotcha. All right.
You can do that too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Ah.
I mean, yeah. And again, I was past the heyday, slightly past the heyday.
Well, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was still a lot of work up until
It was a lot. Yeah.
1983 or so when
Yeah.
a drum machine came out. But your first show on Broadway?
A chorus line.
So you took over for the drummer? Yes.
So technically, there was a minute there that they made a change in the drum chair, and I was the drummer for 2 months. And then it was crazy. I was in this little storm of they were making changes at chorus line, and Don Pippin, who was my guy, said, we got to get Ray. They still kept the 2 drummers, and they added me as a 3rd drummer. Then it wasn't like it is now. You ever hear something called walkers?
Yes. Explain what walkers are for people that don't know.
It was like, so based on audience capacity, the orchestra had to have a certain number of musicians in the pit. So a chorus line did not need strings. It was not written for, it did not need a string section. It did not need French horns. It did not need 26 pieces. It only had, I think it was a 16-piece band. So there was a little, so the producers of a chorus line had to pay 26, they had to write 26 paychecks, even though there were only 16. It doesn't exist anymore. I see you shaking your head.
So were you one of were you one of the 10?
I became one of the 10.
So you got paid and didn't have to go in? Or did you have to go in?
This was all new. This was all like it was weird. It was weird. They still had the 2 drummers, Hank and Earl, but they added me as the younger guy to do most of the work, but they still got paid. Clayton, I was young. I was Okay. Of course I'm going to take it. Sure. So I did it. But the ironic thing is it only lasted 3 months for me because then Don Pippin got Radio City.
Oh, I got you.
Took me to Radio City. So
Ah. So you did Radio City and then came back and did your own show with that.
Ball. Yeah, with Don.
And what was that show again?
Woman of the Year.
And how long did that run?
2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then Don got another La Cardinal Fall, which ran about 4 years.
Wow.
I guess I was lucky. I was the right time, the right place. I could play well. I had the training. I liked, it all worked out for me. But I wasn't doing hit records. The guys back then, you had tons of hit records coming out also.
Well, La Cage was when? What year did that start?
83.
Okay. 1983. I was about to be a senior in high school.
Yeah.
So I remember.
You look great.
Oh man, that's a lot of wheatgrass juice and kelp. I don't even know what kelp is. I just made that up. It's probably some kind of nutritional thing.
I like your posts. I like. Okay, but you don't have to keep this, but you have a great sense of humor, and I used one of your lines actually. I think I used it 2 weeks ago. It's like, correct me if I'm right or wrong. You said, if I don't go to your funeral, would you go to mine? What was your?
I said that. It was probably a question that I asked a while ago.
Think about that. If I don't go to your funeral, would you come to mine? How could he come to yours if he's dead?
See, that's deep, man. That's deep thinking.
Well,
and you had to think, it's like, wait a minute.
It ties into your wheatgrass. I don't know what that is either.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I should have said hemp. I don't know.
Okay, right.
Cannabis. No, I don't do cannabis.
Yeah. What is it? Cannabis.
I forgot.
Why did you forget? Oh shit!
Too much of that shit. That's the problem. Back then, yeah. 1983. I was a rising senior in high school in Manchester, Connecticut. I was into Parliament Funkadelic. Well, actually, they were on the back end of their career, but I was into The Time. I was into, Cameo and Slave, and also I was into Rush because of Moving Pictures and The Police. But I was also into this thing called rap music. It was, some people called it hip hop. I was in Connecticut and I would listen to WBLS and 98.7. I remember back then I used to have, like on Friday and Saturday nights when it was clear, I was able to listen to WBLS and Kiss FM by holding up an antenna like this. I hold it up and I'd stand there like a god, because if I stood in this place, I'd get reception of Mr. Magic's Rap Attack, and I'd hear all this stuff. I'm like, man, New York City is cool, man. I can't wait to live there, until I actually lived here. And I'm like, my God, it's so goddamn stressful. But I idolized and revered rap music, which I still do. And from like 79 until I feel like the early 90s, rap music was just so creative. But rap music started out with bands, and then they went to drum machines. Now, drum machines were prevalent in the early 80s too. And I always ask people that went through this transition, how did you deal with the advent of drum machines, and how did that affect your career?
I was doing a lot of Broadway and shows to make a living. I wasn't a top call studio musician to make a living. That wasn't so. It didn't affect Broadway. It didn't affect my livelihood that much in terms of paycheck and gigs, because I would go to my shows every night. But I think it affected me and everyone because there became less and less work. So that's when I said I came in on the tail, like 70, like 80. It's kind of the tail end. It's starting to come down a little. But I was fortunate to play on those two, even though both those records had drum machines on them. And so did I answer your question? If there weren't computers or digital ways to create grooves and drum, we'd be in the studio right now, wouldn't we? Somehow.
Did you wind up learning how to program a Lindrum or do any of that stuff? Was that necessary for you? I mean, I know you were doing shows at the time, but did you find yourself wanting to learn any of that stuff?
I found myself wanting to learn, and I got the Simmons drum set. I didn't get a Lin. I got the Korg. Korg came out with a drum machine, Lin Light. It was like everybody started to, wow, this Korg machine is great because it had dynamics and you could MIDI it to other sounds. So I got the Korg machine, I got the Simmons. But you know what was happening? Every year there'd be something new coming out, and you'd have to spend literally thousands of dollars every year. Oh, the Simmons are no good. Now you got to get the Simmons. No, Simmons 5 is, no one wants the 5 anymore. You got to do the 7s. So now you got to spend another $3,000. And they were expensive back then. And I'll tell you who was very prevalent back then, Sammy Merendino.
Yes, I'm going to be talking to him soon.
Sammy and Jimmy Braylower.
I remember seeing Jimmy's name on backs of records. Is he still around?
Who's that?
Jimmy still around?
Jimmy Braylower?
Yes.
I don't hear his name. I don't know where he is.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking to Sammy, but I remember going to see Kinky Boots. I watched Sammy play because I just wanted to see what he did. And we just started talking about his life and his career. I remember he programmed so many of those early Cameo hit records. I was like, come here, man. I just gave him a hug. You're like the soundtrack of my youth.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, man. He's a great drummer.
Yeah. And I know he has a nice recording setup in his house. He lives about 2 miles up. I'm on 108. He's on 147.
Okay.
So Sammy would know about Jimmy Braylower. And so in answer to your question, I started, and that's how I got the gig with Dan Hartman. And that's how those 2 gold records came about. I didn't want to be the programmer. So it worked.
Yes. Yes, it did. So you were with La Cage, and that ran for several
4
years?
years.
4 years. Okay. And you went with the conductor to another show after that?
Then my buddy, Paul Bogave, who's a wonderful musician, he asked me to do Starlight Express. Remember that show?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a knowledge of electronic drums at that time, and that show needed electronic drums, but they didn't want Simmons. They wanted something a little more advanced. And I used a Dynacord. There was a company called Dynacord, Dynacord. It had the capability of the hi-hat to go. So that's why they didn't want Simmons. And it also had digital samples of acoustic drums, whereas the Simmons only went, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I embraced technology, but not to the extent of like wanting to be the next Jimmy Braylower or Sammy Merendino. I was more of a player, and I was doing Broadway at the time. So I was 50-50. I have a lot of stuff here.
Oh, wow. The Roland?
I got a V drums and
Yes.
Mallet Cat.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have the Roland SPDS.
So prior to the 50% rule where Broadway musicians could take off 50% of their shows, you had to be there most of the time. Was there any kind of special arrangements that you could make with conductors back then where you could take off more often? Or they always expecting you to be there?
I think the 50% rule, or things started to change around 1980 when I got after I left Radio City. I had to do basically I didn't take off.
So you never have a sub?
Jim Saporito was the percussionist,
I don't think so.
great
Maybe I
drummer,
do.
percussionist. He used to come over and play drums. He's a good buddy of mine. He's a guy you should interview. He's a drummer percussionist at the City Ballet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in about 1980, the rules started to change. You were allowed, there was some more freedom back in 1980. You didn't have to do 8 shows. Maybe I took off 20%, you know.
So what if you were sick one day?
I had subs.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you had to have subs, but you couldn't, most guys didn't take off 50% of the time,
Right.
but you had to have subs.
I never took off 50% of the time. 'Cause I loved every show that I did, and I was just so happy to have a Broadway show. It's like I still am.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful gig to have. But,
Wonderful.
some people do take off a lot more, especially if they're doing a bunch of different things, and it allows
Right.
the freedom to play other types of music. But Starlight Express was your next show. That was in the late 80s.
Correct. That was like, I believe it was 86 to, I think that ran 22 months, 86 to 88. Yeah.
Okay. You said there was more electronic percussion or electronic drums in that show?
Yes.
Ah.
And the orchestra was in a remote room. That was like the beginning. I think Cats was the real beginning of an orchestra not being in a pit.
Mm.
Yeah. And then Starlight Express, they needed the pit area because it was a roller skating show and they built the so that the roller skaters can use the pit for the orchestra.
One thing I ask a lot of people in general, do you watch any or all of the shows that you do from the audience?
I have.
A lot of musicians don't want to do that because when they're in the audience, they see the show and then they hear the sound from the audience and they're like, wait a minute, I can't hear that bell that I play, or I can't, they don't turn up this and they don't turn up that, and they get discouraged. Were you ever discouraged after hearing the sound? Did it change the way you played when you got back into the pit?
No.
Okay.
No. But to be honest with you, yes, I was the chorus line. I couldn't believe it. So I'd be in the chorus line. Well, like I said, it was a 16-inch, about a 16, I think a 16-piece band, and it's brass and percussion, upright bass, electric bass, guitar. It was like everything. Then when I watched the show from the audience, I was like, what? Yeah. How about you?
I've watched every show that I've done except for Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill until I saw it on HBO with Audra McDonald. I saw it on HBO and I did cry at the end because it's so emotional. But, the sound on HBO is a lot different than what it would be inside of a theater. But all the shows that I've done, which isn't very many, I've seen from the audience and I enjoy the sound. Fortunately, the drums are present enough. So I'm kind of happy.
Yeah. I was happy. I played Mamma Mia. I was happy with the drums in Mamma Mia.
We'll get to that in a minute.
But to not throw the sound designers or the sound men under the boat or anything like that, I think the lyrics and the dialogue, like the producers and the directors want that up front so that it's a story. They want to hear the story and the lyrics. So the music becomes here and
No, I know.
So I think there's a fine balance.
After
what else is so what's not happening now is like pits used to be more in the open. They used to be wider. I think over the years they built more seats in the front. So they took away pit space where the pit used to be more open and the natural sound used to come out.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen anymore. And then everything is mic'd now, come to the speakers. Different.
Hmm. Do you prefer the way it was back then as far as being in the pit as opposed to the way it is now where you're in a separate room?
I'm talking about when in the 50s and 60s, that's before mics. So I can't really comment on that because my first show was Chorus Line, and that was, they covered the pit and Chorus Line because they wanted to seem like it was a dance rehearsal room.
Ah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. I never saw Chorus Line. I need to see it.
Yes.
Like 15 years, right?
Yes.
Long time.
Yeah.
What was the next one after that?
So then I had some downtime. I became a dad. I was married, and I was fortunate enough to start working with Tommy Tune. You know Tommy Tune?
Mm-hmm.
So I hope who's ever listening, Tommy Tune has won. I think Audra McDonald has tied him now. You know Audra well, don't
Oh,
you?
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I think Audra has 9 Tony Awards. I think
6.
she might have 6.
Yes.
Okay. Tommy Tune has 9.
Really?
Yeah, because he's a choreographer, performer, and a director. So he won he's won Tony Awards in all those categories, 3 different
Wow.
times. So after Starlight Express, Tommy Tune was touring the country, and I went on the tour with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, Will Rogers Follies. Remember that show?
I've heard about it.
Yeah. Tommy Tune was the director, choreographer of that. I think he won at least 2 Tony Awards from that one.
Ah,
And the drummer for that one.
okay. When you had these shows, what was your approach in training your subs back then? Was there any kind of special thing that you did to make sure that your subs were prepared? Or you just said, here, learn this and come back to me when you're ready?
I would mark my parts because I had subbed when I didn't have my own show. I know what it's like to sub. And I would think of my subs and say, well, I better put this in red. You know, that cymbal crash is important. Or yellow highlighter, watch the conductor here. So I would just mark the music as best as I can. And not too elaborate. I didn't use, you know, some people use little yellow stickers or red colored stickers. No, I would use a highlighter or a red pencil, and I would tell the guys, watch out here. The cymbals crash is important. Watch here, it's tricky. The conductor's holding. He's going to cut off. He's going to do upbeat, and then you come in. You know, sometimes they might just do this if there's a fermata, and then there's point. So I would just tell them, hey, there's no prep. He's just going to point. Stuff like that. No, I'd be conscious. I wouldn't let the guys just go, it's easy. Just, no, I wasn't.
What do you think is the most important thing that a sub should know when they want to sub for someone like yourself or just sub in general?
Okay, so first of all, you got to know if you're in over your head. Like, okay, I could play this style, or no, I can't play this style, not for me. So I would say, okay, I could play this style. I think it's in my wheelhouse, and I'm willing to put in the work. It's a lot, as you know, it's a lot of work. It's not just like you're playing for a singer one night, and it's cool to just play a rock beat or a funk groove, and it's got to be very specific. So you have to know if you have the time, the technique, and the knowledge to play that particular show. And once you establish that you can do that, then you put the time in. You got to go watch it minimum 4 times, right? And then now you have the conductor cam, which really helps. I think that every show has that now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every show. And that's a huge help. So now you have the music, you conduct the cam, and you just start and stop. Wait a second, what did she or he do? Stop. And you have to have the knowledge to know this is the problem. This could be a problem. And shows are full of them. Every show has an issue. You can't, only in an emergency, like a snowstorm or something, can you go in and play a show. That's happened to people where maybe the guy's not quite ready, but he lives in town. I think it's a lot like sports now, like football players and basketball. That they have to know so much. It's not just going and catching the ball. Yeah. So yeah, I think for me, it's harder to be a sub than have your own show. What do you think?
Yes. Man, I forgot who said it. I think it was one of my friends said, subbing on a show is like a 2.5 hour heart attack, especially on drums, because it's like, the pressure is so high. And if you make a mistake with a fill going in, it could not trigger the lights, somebody coming in, something going up the middle of the stage, and so much can go wrong.
That's
So
right.
the pressure is on. And you have to be willing to take on that responsibility.
When I sub, the last couple of shows I've subbed, I tried and it succeeded in getting the conductor to work with me like an hour before, or like they have, like at 7, if the show starts at 8 o'clock, there's only a small window where you can actually work with the conductor. And I think that's important to try to get that in the actual drum set and the conductor, and to actually, hey, can you try? Okay, and big number 2, what do you do in letter C? Could you just show me how you do that? And then you actually do it. So you have to know as the drummer, where are the potential problems? Where is it? Yeah.
Yes, it's not easy. Speaking of subbing, after you sub, I was talking to Shannon Ford about this. Taking the notes that a conductor gives to you, how do you approach taking that criticism? When you sub a show for the first time, somebody says, Ray, on bar number 2 of song number 7, your crescendo should have been a little bit bigger there, but don't do it on the second half of that crescendo. Make sure that the bell of the cymbal, it's like, first of all, how do you remember?
I know.
How do you remember all that stuff? But how do you take it after you get the notes?
Well, that's part of the thing. When you watch the show, like if I watch you play Ain't Too Proud, I have to say, okay, do I want to take this on? You don't have to say yes. There were shows I watched. I remember the great Dave Radijek. He played Titanic, and I was kind of busy at the time I was subbing, and I watched him play Titanic, and there was a lot of intricacies. And I said, Dave, I don't have the time to do this now. So I said, no. So if you do say yes, you got to take that criticism and no. Okay, you're going to get that email. Big number 2, bar 37, you didn't hit the bell at the end of the crescendo. Okay. You can either say, oh, who cares? Who's going to hear it anyway? And if you get that attitude, you're out. You're out. You're out. Not for you.
Like, nobody hears that in the audience, because I was out in the audience. Doesn't matter. The musical director wants to hear that bell in that song at the end of the crescendo, and just
have a positive attitude towards it. If you don't have the positive attitude, it's okay. There was a show, The Life, a Cy Coleman show, The Life. So I remember the conductor really liked me at The Life, Gordon Harrell. He liked me. But he kept giving me notes, and I was like, man. He conducted one night, and he said, Ray, let me just tell you, Gordon loves you. Don't let it discourage you. I almost let it discourage me in that show. But Joe Baker talked me off of like not saying, no, it's too, I don't want any more notes. So it almost happened at that show for me. But it didn't.
Wow. So in the Going back to the 80s, were you playing with people like Earl Clue and Johnny Winter and, Bernadette Peters, Liza Minnelli and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Rare Clue. I just did one recording. The bass player from a chorus line who's no longer with us, Roland. Roland Wilson liked the way I played chorus line, and he knew Earl Klug, and he said I was lucky and in the right time in the right place, and I got to play on a song called "Return of the Rainmaker" with Earl Klug. It was in and out, big orchestra date. I was nervous. Bernadette Peters, I played with her a lot. For Cubby O'Brien was her drummer. He's a fantastic drummer. He's another guy. Man, there's a lot of guys. So he couldn't do some Bernadette gigs, and I subbed for him.
How to succeed in business without really trying. Was that
Yes, that was a 93 to 95. Yes.
most of your shows seem to run pretty long time? Did you have any shows that were, this is going to be the next big thing and then wound up running for a really short time?
The last I did two of them, but you kind of know, like, okay, there was a show called The Red Shoes back in 91 that people were talking about. It was a famous movie, a big show about a ballet dancer and her red shoes and a love story and this big, really and Julie Stein wrote the music, who wrote Gypsy. Julie Stein wrote the music. It's this great. But once it got into previews and the word was like, it's not going to make it. Not going to make it. So
how long of a run did it have?
Maybe 2 weeks only.
God.
Yeah. And do you remember Dance of the Vampires?
I've heard the name, but
that was another one. That was another one. And that was 2003. That was a big hit in Germany. It was like a big gothic, dark musical with Jim Steinman wrote the music. But then when they came here, when they brought it to the United States, for some reason, they wanted to make it satirical and more like a comedy. And it was like, what? And so people didn't know if that would, it might make it, but early on, that ran like a month.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Did you get discouraged by these flops? You're like, oh my God, I'm not going to have a long running show again?
Yeah, I got discouraged. My son is now in his 30s, but he was about to go to college, and my stepdaughter was about to go to college, and my wife, Nina Hennessy, who's a great singer and performer, she wasn't working as steady at the time, and I was like, oh man, it's discouraging.
So what kept you going? What was the thing that said, I got to stick with this? Did you ever think, man, it's time to get a quote unquote real job, as they say? Did you ever think, I need to do something else?
I couldn't at that point in 2003. I was, how old was I? I don't know. I didn't know how to do anything. Maybe teach. I could get some private students, but my wife did. My wife, Nina, who's fantastic. She's still wonderful singer, actress, dancer. She got a second career as a licensed real estate broker. So she does both. She has the brain power and the patience to do both. So it's right about that time, 2003, when Dance of the Vampires flopped, she was getting her real estate. So we made it work, even though we had a couple of years where credit card debt became pretty high. It's not easy.
No, trust me. I understand. But things turn around like they always do, which leads us into Mamma Mia, I guess.
Okay.
What after Dance of the Vampires and that kind of fell apart? What happened after that?
I saw this up. I subbed at 42nd Street. I don't know which other shows. Maybe Rocky Horror Show,
Mm.
Lion. I used to sub at Lion King. I don't know if I went back to. I started to sub, and my wife had her real estate license, so she was making some money. And then out of the blue, tragically, the drummer from Mamma Mia, it wasn't working out anymore.
Mm.
So
So you took over.
I was one of the drummers who got asked to sub. So I had to learn the show. I wasn't on the sub list, but the guys in the band said, why don't we get Ray in? He doesn't have a show. Why doesn't Ray learn the show? And why can't he be in the pool? They listened. There were like 3 or 4 guys who they wanted to possible replacements. And my kids were both ready to go to college. I didn't have a gig. My wife is in the, I was in that's where you were talking about, hey, college, no gig, no steady. So I practiced, and I got the gig. Doesn't always happen, man. And I was so guilty about it. And I actually said to the conductor, I'm not going to mention names. I mean, I said to the conductor, I said, if I don't accept this job, will it go back to the drummer who needs to be replaced? He said, no. If you don't accept it, we're gonna give it to another. So he would have said, yes, if you don't accept it, we'll consider.
Mhm.
I probably wouldn't have accepted the job because it was terrible. It was not a good.
Yeah,
terrible.
I hear you. Well, you wound up doing that show from what year? 2006?
2004.
2004 until what year? What year did it close? Like 12 years later, right?
2015.
My God.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And listen, I accepted. Hey, did I do anything wrong to get this gig? No, I just got the call out of the blue to
Radio Registry called you.
have 582-8800. Oh, I always call that number right now. Hold on. Oh, sorry.
I'd be like, hello? This should be like a radio registry for Broadway drum subs. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so then Mamma Mia was basically a gift. It was a gift, man. A gift to me. And the other drummer, I think he moved back to his hometown, and I think he's doing okay. I'm not in touch with him, but every once in a while I see him. I did see him on Facebook.
Mm. During that run of that show, is that when you got the Rosie O'Donnell show?
Which one?
Yes.
My mom, Rosie O'Donnell, I got from during How to Succeed in Business, and I have John McDaniel to thank for that, he's a fantastic musician and piano player. He had auditions for that, and I got that one too.
So that was during the daytime?
Yes.
And then you went to Mamma Mia.
No, not Mamma Mia. How to Succeed. That was the Rosie O'Donnell show ran from 1996 to 2002. So at the time I was doing How to Succeed. I was double dipping at that time for a little while.
Did you wind up getting burned out from all of that work?
No, because How to Succeed closed. Sure, I think maybe there was 4 months where it was both together. No, yeah, but I still subbed on Broadway a little.
Okay.
Because the Rosie O'Donnell show was live, and I'd be home in my house back at noon, so I had the rest of the day free.
What time did you have to get to the show? In order
About 7 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, so 7 a.m. We'd have like usually maybe 20 minutes of run. So the Rosie O'Donnell show, sometimes they'd have acts that we have to play for. And sometimes they'd have self-contained acts. Like if James Taylor came on, we didn't play with James Taylor. He had his own band. If
You did stuff with Phil Collins and Tony Bennett, Bette Midler,
yeah,
Cher. So what was it like working with those people? I mean, did you get a chance to interact with them?
no, John McD was the guy. John McD would say, okay, on Thursday we're going to be doing this number with Cher, let's say, and he'd give us a recording to listen to. Usually I think that was prior to really. So we'd have those he'd give us a DVD or CD of the recording, and no, I didn't go up to Cher and say, "Hey," no, I was the drummer, and McD was the musical director, so it all got through McD. Yeah, that was fun, challenging. Sometimes a lot of Broadway shows. When did you do Memphis?
2009 to 2012.
Okay. So a lot of times the Rosie O'Donnell band would have to play a number from a Broadway show because Rosie loved Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we had to play something from a Broadway show, it was like a version of the show. It didn't have to be precise. There was leeway.
Did you have subs at that show as well? Like people that, if you couldn't make it, or were you always there?
I only took off like 3 times in 6 years. Terry Silverlight was Terry? Great drummer.
Another name that I remember reading the back of records back in the day. It's like, man, this guy is everywhere.
Yeah. So, yeah. Some days were real easy at the Rosie O'Donnell show where it's like James Taylor and the ins and out of the Rosie show. Quite often during the commercials, she would stop the band so she could talk to the audience. So a lot of times we didn't have to play when there's the 3-minute commercial break. We just have to come back. They'd say, okay, you're coming back in 20 seconds. So then we'd come back in. So sometimes it was easy, sometimes it was not.
So many years at Mamma Mia. That closed. Now you have a bunch of money in your pension, I'm sure, from that show and other shows and other things that you've done. Did you say, you know what? I'm ready to retire, or I want to keep going?
Oh, I said I'm going to keep going. So right after Mamma Mia closed, the bass player Paul Adamy.
Yes.
Oh, Paul.
Yes, I do.
How great is Paul, man?
Amazing.
He said, Ray, Martin Axe is a very good MD, but I do this. Martin got an off-Broadway show called A Trip of Love. He said, Martin hired me to do it, but Martin thinks you don't want to do it because it's off-Broadway. I said, hell, I'll do an off-Broadway show. So I got that. And that ran 10 months. So I did an off-Broadway show. Then after that, I kept getting these calls. I got called to take over. Oh, Seth Rudetsky's show, the Disaster, the show Disaster.
I've heard of it before.
That, unfortunately, it didn't run long. Then I took over for Perry Cavari. You know Perry?
Mm-hmm.
Took over for him at Something Rotten for just 3 months, and then it closed. And then I did Miss Saigon, the latest revival of Miss Saigon.
Yes, that's where I saw you in the pit for the first time. Very cool. I didn't see the original one, and I enjoyed the new one. I always heard about the helicopter and all that stuff, but it was interesting to see you play, and there were 2 other percussionists, correct?
One other percussionist, Chihiro Shibayama.
It was massive. You guys had so much going on back there. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that was fun. I have a video. I should put that up on YouTube of us playing. This little piece talking about the pension.
Yes.
So we're saved.
That's what I hear. That's a good thing. Did you ever, you're 60 6, you said?
Yeah.
You could actually retire next year and get the full pension.
65.
Would you
I'm
ever
up that age.
would you ever retire and then, do another show? Because you can, from what I understand. You can
Yeah,
retire.
I would do that.
You're not ready to do that just yet.
What?
Yes.
I'm not ready to retire. I have some good projects. I played a lot during COVID in Riverside. Riverside Park is like a block away from me. The guitar player Oz Noy
Mm-hmm.
lives in my neighborhood, and we went to Riverside Park at least 30 times during COVID. I just wheeled a very small drum set, and we played standards, and we recorded it. After COVID, when things started opening up around December, we went to a recording studio, recorded that. And then Ed Palermo, I play in this big band. We play a lot of Frank Zappa music and a lot of Ed's original music. We play music of Edgar Winter. We play classic rock for big band. So the reason I'm mentioning all that is it's more creative for me to play jazz and Ed Zappa stuff, but I'm not ready to hang it up with and turn down a Broadway show, But I will be honest with you, since I'm 66 and it is cyclical. So like when I started Chorus Line, I was 25 and all the other guys were in 50s and 60s. So now I'm here, right? And the younger conductors, let's say they're what are they, 35, 40, 45, they don't know me. So they're going to hire people that they're going to want people they went to college with or people they were on the road with. So I started to feel like, okay, maybe I'm here now. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, since you have so much experience in the music business, playing shows, playing on TV, what advice would you give those younger drummers who are interested in playing in Broadway shows? What's like the biggest piece of advice that you'd give them?
Okay. So first of all, you got to be passionate and really want to do it. It's got to be your calling. I think it's got to be you. You want to be a musician. I want to be a musician. So, okay. So now you're saying specifically Broadway. I mean, young musician or
young Broadway drummer. They want to play drums on Broadway. Since you've done so much over your career, you know what? This is what you would say to them.
Drum on Broadway, right? Is that what you're saying?
Drums on Broadway. Drums on
I would say it's a crowded field. Really, as you know, isn't it crowded? How many guys asked you to sub for you?
75.
How many?
75. I counted them up, yes.
75 guys called you and asked if they could sub for you.
And one woman.
Okay. When I say guys, I mean...
Yeah, I know what you mean. Just to clarify, it made, and nowadays it makes a difference, but yes. I get 76 altogether.
I didn't mean that.
I know what you mean. But a lot of people have...
When you go to an orchestra, if a conductor comes into an orchestra, he says, hey, guys.
Right. So,
guys and girls, 75 men and women asked you to sub for them. So the first thing I would say, okay, you can do it if you're schooled and trained. Yeah, but you gotta, I think if I was 25, I would certainly want to know how to engineer in Pro Tools. I would certainly want to know how to mix, do my own. I would set up some kind of home recording so that I could do tracks for people. I would teach. This is not hard to do. I mean, it takes more. I would learn how to write in Sibelius or Finale, write your own charts. You got to become versatile and not 75 men and women asked you to sub, and you're going to use 5 of them, right? So what's going to happen to the other 70? You got to become versatile. Teach, maybe if you're younger, learn how to sing, even if you don't have a good voice. Like I, I maybe lost one gig because I didn't sing, but I didn't. Fortunately, I wasn't in that position where, hey, are you a singing drummer? No. Okay, another gig. So do as much as you can. I would say, man. Right? Doesn't that make sense?
When it comes to actually playing on shows, what do you think someone should know in order to play on Broadway shows?
Okay. So that was, I didn't answer your question. I just said, if you want to be a musician, this is what you got. So you got to know how to read. Like what I talked about earlier, you got to see if it's in, that shows in your wheelhouse. You said maybe if it was a Fania All Stars show, maybe you weren't the right guy. And for me, maybe if it was I don't know, the Greek shows, I'd say no, not for me. Or if I got asked to do a show and I had to play like these really hard mallet parts, it's not in my wheelhouse right now. So know it's in your wheelhouse. Be well trained. I would play as much music with bands as I can. Like your show, what's the best way to play Motown grooves? You play with a band, man, do gigs, do gigs. Even if they're not going to pay money, go out and have jam sessions, go become a real player. You got to you can't just fake playing like you played. You can't just fake that. So am I answering your question? Okay. So you want to become the best player you can. You want to know if it's the right style for you. If you're a drummer, it'll help to be a percussionist, to learn how to play some bell parts and mallet parts and timpani parts. Definitely, it helped me. That's how I got Miss Saigon. So I would encourage, play with big bands, play jazz, just play, man. You got to play. Do those gigs even if it's, the bitter end with a singer-songwriter and you got to schlep your drums and you're going to make $25 and you're going to have to pay $25 for a cab. Do it, man. I used to do that all the time.
Me too. Me too for years.
You got to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be fake. You're going to be fake.
And people can tell.
Yep.
When you sound like you're imitating and you're not authentic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of gear, do you have endorsements with various companies? And was that from playing shows or was that from you playing with so many different people over the years?
So when I played with Dan Hartman, I got my first endorsement with Zildjian. Lenny DiMuzio was the artist rep back then. And believe it or not, Dan Hartman opened up for Toto.
Jeff Porcaro play?
Yeah. So, what Lenny said? Jeff uses Paiste cymbals. Of course, we're going to give you Zildjian.
Damn.
That was my first endorsement. And then when I got the Rosie O'Donnell show, I got Vic Firth. I think I got Vic Firth before Rosie. Marco Soccoli. Remember Mark? You know Marco? He got me Vic Firth. So I got Vic Firth, Zildjian, Vic Firth, Remo, and Pearl. Yeah. And they're all great. I use them all. Yeah.
Do you use all of those for each show that you do?
Yes.
Oh, good.
But if I'm subbing and the drummer uses Yamaha drums, I have to take apart every one of his drums, and bring in my.
It's like Ray's coming in. All right, bring the drum set. That's funny.
No, I use.
Or you cover up the logos on the thing so you don't see them. Those are Evan's heads. Oh no, I'm sorry. I got to put tape on them. That's funny. Oh man, Matt, I gotta okay.
You want
This may or may not go on the podcast, but have you ever had subs that come in and totally change things around to the point where you come back in and you're like, what did you do? This is one
oh,
thing you don't do when you're sub is come in and change everything around to make it to your liking and then leave. Because when the regular drummer comes back, they need to be comfortable. So they need to make sure you need to make sure that you at least readjust things to an approximate height
yeah, yeah.
of what the drummer generally did. Did you have any kind of nightmares?
I would warn the guy. I said, please, please don't. You can move the snare drum a little, maybe, but the soundmen have their mics.
That matters. That matters too. They're
Yeah,
like something
maybe
changed last night.
do it that much, maybe, whatever. So every once in a while, the mix. Well, now they're digital mixes, so now you give each sub has their own mix. But in Mamma Mia, we didn't have a digital mixer; we had analog.
Mm-hmm.
So every once in a while, I come in and say, "Oh, man. That's the hardest. That's one of the hard things about subbing is having to play on the the guy or girl that you're subbing for. That's yeah. I'm sure you had to deal with that a lot. So as a sub, you gotta go. You should go in, find out when you could go in to play the drums. If the light switch if there's a light in the pit. If there's no light in the pit, you got to bring a flashlight. You got to get permission to feel that equipment. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
One last question. Where can people find you on social media or
So my
website?
website, which needs an upgrade, raymarchica.com, RAYMARCHICA.com. I'm on Facebook. My name. Yeah. Yeah. You're really good at this, Clayton.
Well, thank you, man.
Thank you.
That's why I'm doing this because I love doing this. I love talking to other musicians. People are into it. People are listening. Oh my God, this interview was great with Shannon and with Matt Vanderin and this person and Gary Seligson. It's like, well, shit, I got like 20 more guys to talk to. So just wait. And people are just loving to hear the stories because I don't think people have heard these stories yet.
No. Great. Wonderful.
Thank you, Ray Marchica, for taking time out to join me on Broadway Drumming 101. I can't wait to see you in person sometime soon on the Broadway campus.
Same here.
And thanks again for joining me.
Thank you for asking me. Really, and good luck. And you're doing a great thing. It's wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, much success and really good questions. Really good. Me feel very comfortable, natural, and it did your homework. I know you did your homework.
I try. All right.
All right.
Thanks again, man. We'll talk soon.